welcome to the Fantasy Rewind podcast. I'm your co-host, Dylan Stoll, and I'm joined as always by my friend, Michael Whifford.
Hey.
So today, we are back, and after a little bit of a hiatus, but we are still talking about Shadow and Bone Season 2, wrapping this thing up here. We're on Season 2, Episode 7, which is titled...
Meet You in the Meadow.
Meet You
App
in
title.
the Meadow. Yeah, sounds like a good title for this episode, based on the stuff that happens in it. But before we get into the episode recap here, just going to give out the quick reminders here. If you want to get at us on Instagram, we are at Fantasy Rewind Pod. On Twitter, we're at Fantasy Rewind. Or if you want to send us an email and talk to us that way too, that is fantasyrewindpod@gmail.com. All right, no more delays. It's been enough. Let's hop on in here, Mike. Let's dive into the rewind.
Fantasy Rewind. All right, Dylan. It's been a minute since we've talked about some of these episodes here, but I think it might be good to go through this episode and then talk about our thoughts on it. There was a lot that happened here in terms of action. It sort of has continued what I'm reflecting on is an interesting trend where we're seeing characters saved in the last moment.
Yes.
But Meet You in the Meadow, like I said, is an apt title because this one really revolves around Alina and Mal and the Darkling and back where they started. Well,
back where Alina and Mal started.
Yeah, and now encased in the fold.
Yeah.
As well. So... in this episode, we see that the Murzaus is slowly starting to get to Kerrigan. He's on borrowed time, and we have we'll say the good guys, the regular troops and the non-Kerrigan-sided Grisha try to take the fight to Kerrigan in two ways. They're going to attack Kerrigan kind of head-on, trying to get to him, and then Alina's going to go to the fold with Mal and try to take care of the fold that way. In this episode too, every one of the other characters, all the other major players, I should say, on the good side, if you will, the king's side, find out that Mal is the Firebird. This was kind of an interesting sort of development. Mal told everyone, and Alina was obviously very upset about this, and what happened after was really cool. Everyone sort of banded together and had this moment of just like, oh, well, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And it was really great. And I thought that was cool because it showed Alina that she didn't have to be the one with all the answers.
Right. Like her fear, I think about like them finding out that Mal was the Firebird would result in them wanting to kill him and like meld him to her. Mm-hmm. It seemed to almost be the opposite, where everyone kind of flocked around Mal. And like we're talking about like how they could realistically do this without Mal having to die.
Yeah. I mean, it was a cool scene. I do have some nitpicks with this episode, but we'll get into that later on.
Yeah.
So Kerrigan kind of does kind of predict this basically. He has some of his Grisha, specifically his three chosen ones, if you will, Vatra, Nisho, and Frusi, who is a fire, water, and wind Grisha, and they get amplified from his mother's Bagra's bones, and they're super powerful, which was pretty neat. It was cool to see their power difference kind of displayed here in this fight, right?
For sure. The one thing I will say, like just chiming in here when you're talking about the power boost there, yeah. The power boost they seem to get from Bagra seemed to be so much more than what Alina got from the other amplifiers that she's gotten.
Right?
Yeah. I was like, what is going on here? She has two amplifiers and she's not anywhere close to as powerful as these three.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That was one of my nitpicks, is that their power boost seems to be like way out there. Yeah. Also, too, some of the fighting styles in this one because, I mean, we have this whole thing where obviously the king and his Grisha are going to get Kerrigan, but they end up getting shot down by the Grisha, and the Grisha are basically chasing him all the way back to their hideout, which is so funny to me. They They were just running after them. And they just seemed like the Grisha weren't getting winded or anything. Like they could have just kept running for like miles and miles and miles while, I mean, all of them they were in a plane crash, right? But like still, I was like, what?
It was the wind Grisha pumping the air in their lungs.
I guess so, honestly. But it was pretty cool when they got into the fight and we started to see like the first army versus
the second army.
Yeah, the second army. Man, though, right? There are some things to talk about with that.
There are. First
and foremost, let's just get into it because I think that was honestly the meat of this until towards the end here. But you have the first army who has guns and ammo, and the second army has like obviously their bulletproof clothing.
I think it's actually the opposite, isn't it?
No, the second army is
the Grisha. That's what I'm trying to remember. Is if Grisha are first.
The second army with the Grisha. I'll just say the Grisha. The Grisha with their bulletproof clothing versus the first army who is guns and such, you know, and they're just like sitting behind these barricades shooting at them instead of like, you know, sort of sending people to go around and get them all the time. Like they could have just sat there and done that the entire time and they would have just kept pecking them off because that's what worked.
But I mean, Mike, you've played Final Fantasy. You know how that whenever you fight somebody, you take turns hitting each other, right? Like you don't run up and really was like do that. I know. That's why I brought it up and me think of that so much. I just was laughing at like that almost like turn-based I shoot, now you shoot me structure that they had going on.
It was really like that. Now I do think that how the Grisha used their powers was really interesting, creating that windshield and all that. And I was like, so this is cool because now we're finally seeing how Grisha can fight together. Yeah. Right? And I think that is really unique. That's something we haven't seen before.
Seeing a lot more creativity.
Yeah, but why wasn't like I forget the Heartrender's name, but why wasn't she like just taking one of them out at a time? Instead of, she pulled her axes out and just like, I'm going to stand here with my axes and looking cool. And like, yeah, you do look cool, but like, what are you going to do?
I don't know if she was trying to hide the fact that she was a Grisha or like what, because like you said, there was no reason for her not to be more involved where she could like one by one pick them off. But I don't know.
Yeah. Because like you standing there with your axes and then going to run at them and the king's just like, no, don't. Like, what were you going to do? 1v8, 18, 20 of them? Come on now. And that was just like dumb to me, that whole bit. But yeah, I mean, I thought how the Grisha fought was really cool. When the first army finally got in there and started fighting them hand to hand, I thought that was neat that it did seem like it was very
more even.
Yeah. In a lot of ways. And so it took away the superpoweredness. But at the same time, those Grisha didn't even have to move forward. They could have just sat there and kept blowing the crap up out of all their stuff. Yeah. So that didn't make sense to me either. Why do you want to get close? You're not, like, yes, you're good hand-to-hand fighters, but, like, your strength is literally distance fighting. You would have been better off sending a little unit down there just to hold that and then getting up top and just obliterating everyone. I know, plot, everything else, yada yada.
Plot offers a great defense, Mike.
It is the only defense. So, but anyway, Kerrigan, during all this, decides to basically take the fold and move it. And this brings in a whole lot of trouble for the first army. And he sends his Murzost after Alina, which was really interesting. This is the first time that we see, like, them not hanging out with.
Right, because usually it's been like attached to him or like in the same area that he's in, kind of protecting him in a way. But like you said, it kind of went off on like its own little scouting mission after Alina in this episode.
Yeah. We didn't talk about this before all the fighting. Nikolai speaks to Mal and this was so stupid. Alexis was like, did he just like promise Alina to him? I was like, yeah. I was like, it's kind of not great. But basically, Mal and Nikolai make a deal that Nikolai will take care of Alina and he needs to deserve her. So basically, Mal's just like, I'm going to die, so I want her to be with someone who deserves her.
Mal's like, I got my night with her. You can have for the rest. That's fine with me. And that was so cringy because, so like you said, like Mal has been head over heels in love with Alina this entire time. Yeah. And he finally gets to be with her. and then he's so set that he's gonna die that he doesn't even care about her, doesn't care about that anymore. He's like just kind of passing her off to this king guy that obviously has some level of attraction to Alina as well.
Now, I do think this is important to bring up too, is David's role in all this.
Yes, yeah,
and because this is another thing that's also to me cringy and stupid.
Yeah, this is what I want to talk about.
Okay, so the plan for Mal is that David is going to cut off his finger and put it into Alina so that she can access his power without having to kill him, because they're going to have a heart render slow his heart, so it's like he's dead but not dead. Yada yada, right? And David goes to cut it off, and he can't, because that's when the shadow monster steps up. And during this chaos, David... Oh my gosh. So David and the crew are going to cut off the finger, and they get attacked by one of the shadow monsters. David puts Genya into a service elevator and sends her away instead of just going in with her.
Of course, man. You gotta sacrifice yourself.
Titanic moment? Like, what? Why do we keep doing this?
That door can't handle two.
Yeah. So dumb. So dumb. I'm just like, okay, so Mel and Alina can't be together, and now apparently David and Genya can't be together. Whatever. Come on. Can we just have a different trope here? Anyway.
When this happens, right, and David has to go up against the shadow monster, I'm like, all right, so he's going to die. That's sad for Genya, but I get it. David's not like a major character, really. But I was like, they're doing this so that they can put our 6-shooter friend in the role of the Durist to fuse Mal with Alina. But we'll get to that.
Yeah. Now, Inej does, as Alina's about to get dragged off by the shadow monster, Inej shows up with the blade and takes out the shadow monster, and then her, Nina, Alina, and Mal head into the fold to stop Kirigan. We start to see the Firebird power manifest. It's actually pretty cool looking. And then who walks up and who shows up? None other than Kirigan.
Our favorite Shadowcaster.
Or
Darkling,
the only Shadowcaster now. Yeah. And he interjects, he starts spouting his villain monologue, yada yada. It's like whatever. He knocks down Mal and wounds him. But Alina does manage to hit him with like her own version of the cut, which was really cool, and it obliterated his version. So that was pretty cool to see, like, oh, wow, she's actually powered up now.
Right, because you see the light overtaking the darkness there, and kind of is symbolic as well of, good triumphing over evil. And so I just thought that was, like, a very interesting scene there, where you see Alina finally overpowering the darkness of Kirigan.
Yeah. What's interesting here, too, is the fact that we finally see Alina, like, sort of take back that mantle, right? And then realizing that Mal is dead. Or dying, I should say. He's injured, and it does look like he's dying, and I'm just sitting there like, she's going to have to kill him. Right? There's no other way out of this.
Right.
So that'll be interesting to see. It's setting up nicely for the finale, and what is she going to do? Now, I do also want to point out here during this part that Nina got pulled into the darkness by what we can assume is one of the shadow creatures, and Inej is
MIA.
Yeah. So it seems like it's just Alina, Mal, and the Darkling right now there. Now, anything else you want to say about that scene? And
no, not really, because you're seeing like the showdown between the 3 big players in the show. Because as much as we want to talk about some of the other characters that we might like and everything, it's all about, and it's always been about, Alina.
The love triangle.
Yeah, the love triangle. It's been about Alina, Mal, and the Darkling. And so those 3 are the only... love quadrilateral. Those are the only 3 together in the fold when the episode ends here. So I think it's going to pick back up, and we're going to be at that pinnacle, reaching the climax of the show, where we get to see what happens with this Firebird who is bleeding out, with the Darkling who's been injured, and then with Alina who's going to have some difficult choices to make.
I'm going to be really interested to see what happens with that Firebird power there. So the other fight that we didn't quite wrap up is the fight for the king's head, which is Kerrigan's Grisha. They're tearing through the First Army, but the First Army's been giving him some licks back. I was really surprised in this episode that it was actually as bloody as it was.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it wasn't like over the top bloody or anything, but I looked to Alexis and I was like, this is actually probably the bloodiest the show's been.
Yeah, to me,
I can remember.
This episode was like washing away any young adult feels you might have had for the show with how violent and how bloody it was. It was quite gory for a TV show that I was expecting to not be this way. It's not on HBO. It's not Game of Thrones. It's, but it did its darndest to try and do what they could do on Netflix.
Yeah. Now, it definitely didn't go quite as far as that. Like, you could. It did sort of steer away from that, but yeah, it was getting there. It was getting close.
Still safe for your family to watch, but still was like noticeably more violent.
Oh yeah, definitely, and I think that kind of helped it. So basically, Kerrigan's Grisha get torn down, so it's just the 3 chosen ones left. And they have a definite vendetta against the First Army. One of them was tortured to the point where he couldn't talk anymore, and it was, I don't know, like they were trying to give him some motivations, which Water Girl, we never got any motivation for her and her loyalty to Kerrigan, except it seems like her family might have sold her to him. I don't know. But anyway, it was kind of weird. I wish we had gotten a little bit more for her before her time ended, but those 3 all ended up getting pretty terrible deaths after killing a lot of people in a lot of very
innovative ways. Yes.
Yeah. The raining of the ice down.
Cool. Yeah.
That was really cool. I was like, why didn't you just lead with that?
Right? Why do you save for that? That's your opening volley. Like, you know how they have archers, you have icicles that you can just like shoot at your whim. So like why not just fire it away?
Yeah, and you could have just taken out pretty much everyone the first go. But wait until the very end, and then you kill the king's friend, and he gives a speech about how I did it for the country. You're going to be such a great king. We love you. And
Ravka forever.
Ravka. I got it tattooed on my ass. But anyway, like, I did like his character, and I realized, like, okay, he's dying for emotional effect, but I didn't really feel much of anything, unfortunately, for him. I was just like, man, I wish he didn't have to die just to get an emotional moment. But yeah, he died. And just when you think the king is going to die and it's all over, oh no, who shows up? The crows, yeah.
The crows
show up. And they do some cool stuff. I mean, yeah, honestly, like, it's like they're a whole different team. You know, they take the lightning that was summoned and ground it through the cane. Yeah. The bullet action and just like oh my gosh, Jasper taking the buttons off and just like shooting those.
Right.
Like, that was so cool. So cool.
But Jasper's really cool. I'm glad they gave him like a moment to like shine in the action there.
Yeah, and I think he's going to continue to get that, because I think that the last episode there with the other Duras was like a turning point for him, realizing like, oh, I need to embrace myself. I
can be more, yeah.
So that was very cool to see as well. And they pretty much execute the 3, well, now I think it's just 2 at this point, but the 2 chosen ones of wind and water, and yeah, the king gets the final shot in the water bearer's head.
So looking back at this episode here, I'm like, what are your like overall thoughts on it? Like, how did you feel about it? Did you enjoy it? Like, what did you think about it as a whole?
The action was good. I thought, again, that a lot of the setup for the action and some of the tropes they went into it with, I just was like, well, okay, we're kind of overplaying some of this a lot. Like the whole sacrifice myself for you. And look, that happened 3 times in this episode, you know? And it's just like, okay, we get it. People sacrifice themselves for each other. Oh my gosh, we're over it. You know, because at a certain point, it's just like, I don't have any emotion left because I just feel like it's just going to keep happening and happening. And it's just almost predictable. So instead of doing that, maybe we could find something else to kind of run into. But I thought the action sequences were really good. I loved that the crows came back in just the nick of time, just, how they've been doing, which is another thing I wish they would maybe just
dial back
not lean on
bit.
so heavily. Yeah, just dial back just a touch. I mean, I know, again, you're doing it for dramatic effect, but maybe just have it so, like, the characters who are there have to figure out a way instead of having to rely on someone coming in at the last moment, and save that for when it's like there would be no other way, which would be kind of almost a Grisha fight. Except it would have been cool to see the king actually do something and, like...
Yeah, if the king had more of a moment to shine there, if Nikolai stepped out from behind the barricade and was able to kind of take on the final Grisha, almost like a 1v1 battle there, that would have been a little more interesting than just going up and delivering like the
some
killing
kind
blow.
Of... Yeah, some invention he had invented that, did something.
Right, because
like,
he's an inventor.
That would have been really neat.
Yeah, he should have like his own secret weapons almost that he could kind of like unleash on the Grisha.
Yeah, because he didn't really do anything in this episode except for run and get helped.
Yeah,
and I mean that's okay. That is okay. But I'm just saying they could have done something else with that. So, well, what about you, Dylan? What were your overall thoughts on this?
I mean, overall, you kind of hit the nail on the head for me. Like, I really enjoyed the action in this episode. I thought that it went to surprising lengths and that it kept me engaged because of that. Like, I thought all the fighting scenes were done really well. Some of the creativity with the Grisha powers. I've been like, where has this been all series?
Yeah.
But there were a couple times where I just was like, okay, again. Like when David sacrificed himself and then the other guy sacrificed himself, like you said there. But just in general, I thought that this episode was a stronger episode for the action that was delivered. The actual, like, plot of how it happened and everything like that left a little bit more to be desired. But as far as being able to sit back and enjoy a television show, this definitely had me being able to do that.
Scratch that itch, yeah.
Yeah, scratch that little action itch.
Yeah. But I'm excited for the finale and seeing how the rest of the season ends. I know there's been conversations of it not getting renewed for a third season. So we'll be interested to see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, I've already seen the finale, but I don't want to spoil it for you. And I'll just tell you, like, I think it ends on a very interesting note. So I'll just leave it there.
Okay.
But
I like that.
We'll get into that in the next episode here. But for now, this is going to be Two Nerds signing off. See ya.
See ya.